Hello, everyone, and welcome along to our webinar on social news gathering and strategy. My name is Benedict Nicholson. I'm the Director of Content here at NewsWhip. And today we are going to be talking about how social media relationship with the newsroom has really evolved in the last few years from news gathering to strategic success. So as the news is becoming increasingly fragmented, it's more important than ever for journalists, editors, anyone involved in the newsroom to understand the social internet. And I'm grateful to say that to help us do that today and see what the world looks like in 2025 in this regard, I'm joined by two people that are real leaders in this industry. So without further ado, today I'm delighted to be joined by Catherine Lurie from Reuters. She's the editor in charge of social media there, where she leads strategy and execution across platforms. She specializes in audience engagement, digital strategy, and social-first journalism, and has played a pivotal role in expanding Reuters' social footprint. Under Catherine's leadership, Reuters has strengthened its presence across existing platforms and established itself on new platforms, experimented with new storytelling formats, and navigated the challenges of an evolving social media landscape. She spearheaded coverage of major global events, including the Paris Olympics, elections, and breaking news moments, with an emphasis on real-time engagement and impactful storytelling. With a strong editorial background and deep expertise in digital trends, Catherine is passionate about helping journalists connect with audiences, develop their voices, and maximize impact across social platforms. She holds a master's degree in journalism from the Newmark School of Journalism at CUNY, where she also taught for several years. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks.
And I'm also joined by Sarakshi Rai from The Hill. As the Director of Audience Development at The Hill, Sarakshi leads the team responsible for strategy, analytics, social media, and SEO for one of the leading political news outlets in the United States. In addition to her leadership role, she frequently writes on foreign policy and political issues for The Hill and is a regular television commentator on political affairs. Sarakshi has a proven track record of growing website traffic, expanding social media followings, and increasing user retention by leveraging data-driven insights, innovative tools, and best practices. Among her accomplishments is the successful expansion of The Hill's audience across all platforms, and she brings strong editorial expertise and holds master's degrees in both international journalism and strategic communication, which enable her to produce and assign compelling content across web, video, and podcast formats. I'm very intimidated by the two of you. Welcome, Sarakshi.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And I think, as much as I've tried to do both justice and your roles in that introduction there, I think it would be great to hear from the both of you about kind of how you see your roles at the moment, what you're working on, what you're finding interesting before we get into the meat of this conversation. So, Kate, since I started with you, why don't I ask you to go first there?
Sure. So thanks for having me today. I'm so excited for this conversation. As you said, I'm Kate Lurie. I'm the social media editor at Reuters, and I lead our strategy and our editorial approach across 10 social media platforms currently. It seems like we're always adding more. We make sure our journalism is clear, engaging, and trustworthy wherever people are getting their news. And we focus mostly on translating our global reporting into social native formats while making sure that we stay grounded in our journalistic integrity. So accuracy, independence, fairness, always at the core of everything we do. I spent the previous 10 years before my tenure at Reuters at the Wall Street Journal, where I was on several digital teams, and I've always sort of been interested in how legacy news brands can innovate without losing what makes them so well trusted. And so that's me. I'm super excited for the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. And so actually, if you want to do a quick pitch of yourself as well.
Yeah, so I'm Sarakshi Rai. I'm the Director of Audience Development and the Head of Social Media at The Hill. We're just about 30 years old, so we don't have that legacy media tag. But I think in the last 3 decades, what The Hill has achieved in Washington has been nothing short of spectacular. We really pride ourselves on bringing unbiased political news coverage to our audiences and kind of explaining to them exactly what's happening in Congress, both to our core audience, which is obviously members of Congress, senators, the administration officials, but also regular Americans who might not understand the inner machinations of, what makes the government tick. And that's something, we love bringing to our audiences. But we really strive to be unbiased in everything we do. We really guard that with everything that we have. And, all of the editors at The Hill really take that very seriously. So, if there's anything that the Hill does, it's unbiased news coverage, and that's something we're very proud of, across social media, across, even to the down to our headlines, to how we report a story, making sure we have all of the arguments covered. We don't really have very biased news stories either. And I think that's what makes audiences resonate with some of our reporting and our coverage. And so I'm very proud to work at a newsroom that really focuses on that.
Great. Yeah, I do. I want to dig into that in a second. I think the unbiased or the deliberate focus on a lack of bias from both of your institutions makes for a really interesting version of this webinar, because it's obviously very different. There's a lot of fact checking, etc., that goes into kind of the news gathering aspect. Just want to quickly touch on logistics for this first. We're going to talk for about probably 25 minutes now that we've done the introductions. Please introduce yourself in the comments on LinkedIn. My colleague Haley will be there to answer any questions. If you have any questions for the panel, please do throw them in the comments there. We'll have 10 minutes at the end if anyone does have any questions. I want to spend probably half of the webinar, maybe the first 10 minutes, talking about news gathering, but then I think it would be remiss of us not to talk about strategy with a couple of expert strategists in the room as well for social media. So I do want to spend some time on that. So we're going to split the focus of the webinar a little bit. To do that, let's start talking about news gathering then. I think, Sarakshi, for you, a question I would have is, political stories often break on social media, right? So when that happens, what are the first steps that your team take to assess whether it's something credible, whether it's something worth pursuing? And I'd imagine that's different when a member of Congress tweets versus a Joe Schmo member of the public. So are there different processes, and what do those look like?
Very different processes involved, right? I mean, just take yesterday as an example. As I'm sure those in the news biz are aware, we found out that one of the president's key allies, Elon Musk, who has recently left government, was extremely unhappy with his big, beautiful bill. How did we find that out? We found that out through a social media post, right? He posted it on X, and cue chaos, And so that's how we usually get to know the news now. I mean, it was very different maybe this time last year, where you had more official channels that were sharing or breaking some of these news, but now you have everyone just taking to X or taking to Truth Social or taking to another social media platform to kind of share their thoughts, and immediately it is breaking news. We had our reporters on it instantly. We have alerts set up for all of these people, right? So the breaking news team then gets it. The White House team then adds their expertise. The reporters will reach out to the administration to get an official response. So it's really a mix of the newsroom coming together and putting together the best possible version of the story. We'd maybe do a breaking news stub, as we call it in the news biz, on the tweet, but then we'll keep updating the copy like a wire service does, that Kate is well aware with, throughout the hour with new updates as our reporters confirm and get it. So, we added in the White House response because Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked that question at the press briefing. So that was included in the file. We also heard from members of Congress on social media. That was included in the file. So for verified personalities like Elon Musk, it's a pretty standard, and the newsroom works like a well-oiled machine. I think where there are more steps in place is when we have these unverified comments on social media made by anonymous users, and that is where we proceed with a lot more caution, because sometimes, is it AI, is it a bot, is it how do we go about it? So sometimes we'll just flag some things that we see on social media internally, and then we'll reach out to whatever the story is to verify if that is in fact accurate and correct, and we wouldn't just go off of a tweet if it's not someone who is an official or not coming from an official source. Because what if we're wrong? That's a huge breach of trust for our audiences, and the most important thing, given just how fragmented the media landscape is and how much trust in news has deteriorated over the years, you really have, that's what the audience has in you and resonates with you. So you can't really lose that trust in them. So we proceed very cautiously when it is a non-verified, non-government, non-official source on social media.
Yeah, and I think keeping that trust is like gold dust for news brands these days. I think it's one thing if you've built trust with your audience. It's so important to keep that. I'd imagine it's much the same at Reuters, Kate. It's a similar kind of process.
Very much so. We definitely have multiple teams monitoring Instagram and TikTok and of course, X and Truth Social, because that's where we get a lot of news these days from the White House. But much the same as the Hill is very. We proceed very cautiously with any sort of unverified UGC or any sort of eyewitness account of anything. We actually have full teams for verification and for UGC, and we make sure that anything that surfaces through social, it goes through the same editorial process as all of our other reports from Reuters.
Great. And what does that collaboration look like? This is a question for both of you, I suppose. When it comes to the collaboration between editorial and social teams, what's the feedback loop? So a social team might see a story, send it to editorial, and then it goes back to social. What does that workflow look like? Is it the same people all talking to each other constantly, or are there silos within those teams?
I can go quickly. So we definitely flag anything that we see, but often our reporters are also watching. Mm-hmm. So they are just as likely to see something as we are, and they will snap it, what we call snapping for the wire, which is basically putting out a news alert, and then they will follow that with an update, and then they'll keep updating the story, and on social, we will take the story and distribute it in whatever format, in whatever context it makes sense for the platforms, and we will keep updating it. For example, like we'll do for a breaking news story, we'll often do a thread on X, and continue adding to the thread as the story develops, to actually be super transparent and add context as we have it.
Yeah, and it's pretty much the same for us too. We call it grabbing a story. So, and I think one of the reasons why The Hill grew their audience is because we're very good at breaking news. Our reporters and our audience teams are on it. So if it's not flagged by our reporters or the editors, it's flagged by the audience team, and then we get moving on putting the story out to all of the different platforms and updating it throughout the day. And then once the story is written out, the editors will flag it back to my team, and then we'll make a determination. Okay, is this a breaking news email? Is it an app and browser alert as well? Is it an Apple News alert? Is it, how do we share it on different platforms? Is it an Instagram post? Is it, is there video associated with it? Should we put it on TikTok and Instagram? So it's all of those things, I think, that really ensure that the story has life and reaches the audience on social media. And that's, partly because of collaboration and teamwork, and it just wouldn't be possible unless all of these different teams were coming together to make sure that this happened.
Yeah, and on that, I think an interesting question for you, Sir, actually is do you kind of have concentric circles of priority, I suppose, is the best way I could describe it. So, like if the president tweets or sends out an X post, everyone's looking at that, decide whether it's newsworthy. Whereas, if a staffer for a congressman says something, that's maybe less of a priority. How do you prioritize? Is it based on how many engagements something gets, or is it just you have a list of like, these are the 10 priority accounts, these are the people that we have to know everything they say, and then anything else is on top of that, and we'll get to it as and when we have time?
I think it depends on the news, because sometimes there's also an over posting from some of our officials and representatives, right? So we kind of make that call based on what the significance of the news within that post is. Is it the president ramping up criticism of Putin? That is something that we want to write out. Is it, like yesterday, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she maybe regrets voting for the big beautiful bill? That's something we would write up, right, as a breaking news story. But is it, um, someone just announcing that they have a new fundraising platform, or they have launched, a new campaign? Maybe if they're it's an interesting race, if their district is um, competitive, if they're going up against establishment, yes. But if it's, so you have to kind of gauge what the audience interest is in the particular story and then make that call, I would say.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's still a lot of qualitative journalistic assessment that's going into this.
It's news judgment, right? It's why we value people with experience so much in the newsroom, because you have to be able to sift through what is noise and what is actually news, just given how much is out there right now and how much is percolating out in social media. So I would say news judgment is still the most important thing that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to move on a bit and talk about platforms. We talked about Truth Social. I don't know if we're just monitoring one account on Truth Social more than any other. That I'd imagine that might be the case. But what do you see, 2025, fragmented media ecosystem, both from a news gathering standpoint and to begin to pivot a little bit into the strategy storytelling part of this? What platforms do you see as the must monitors, and why, and where are you getting and putting out information? And Kate, I'd like to start with you if possible.
Well, over the next year or so, I think it really depends on the news, of course. But I think across platforms, and this goes for all the platforms, I think we're entering a phase where trust and transparency is going to be even more important than ever. Especially as like AI generated content continues to kind of flood the zone. I think we'll have to have a shift toward newsrooms sort of being like radically transparent with their sourcing and verification and showing the work, not just the outcome. And I think that goes for every single platform. And I think it's super important to have clear sourcing and clear facts, be unambiguous and unbiased. And I don't know that one platform is necessarily emerging as like more important than others. I know that there are some that are smaller and that are kind of gaining traction, like Blue Sky, and I know that we're working on building our following on WhatsApp on our broadcast channels. And those have been really interesting places to experiment with, and I look forward to doing more on those channels, and maybe even joining whatever else comes out in the night. Who knows what's coming. As platforms are deprioritizing news, I think it's more important than ever that we are more present everywhere.
And so actually, I'd ask you the same question.
Yeah, I think the landscape has changed so much from when social media was driving traffic to news websites, right? It's just completely altered. We've seen the shift, but we are seeing some social traffic coming back, which is why, I think at the Hill, our policy has always been to try and err if possible, or succeed. You never know which platform is going to take off unless you don't try. And I think you never know which platform is going to have a following these days. We are on Blue Sky, we are on X, we are on LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, well, X, Facebook, all of it, because if that's where the audience is searching for our content and finding it, why wouldn't we want to be there, essentially?
Yeah, you don't want your voice to be replaced by a different voice on the platform, I guess, because somebody's always going to talk about the news on these platforms, right? And I think that's, I really liked your point about trust, Kate, and Sarakshi and I have talked about this before on a different panel. I'm curious again, to both of you, like how you build and maintain that trust with your audience. I know you said unambiguously sourcing, but for example, like the rise of news creators and what that means for legacy news brands, like they have this almost conversation with their audience and community built around themselves. How do news brands replicate that without losing trust from their audience? And Kate, I know you've done a lot of work on building the Reuters TikTok, so that's obviously a different strategy to how a news creator might approach that. But how are you approaching that and kind of building that trust, community, whatever it might be, however we might refer to it?
It's funny you mentioned TikTok because we just celebrated passing 1 million followers on our account, which is pretty good for a legacy news brand, if I do say so. But we so much has gone into building that following, and I think ultimately, we've been having a lot of success in recent months with the news surrounding the Pope, both the death of Pope Francis and then the election of Pope Leo. It was shocking to me how interested our audience was there in that story. And we were lucky to have someone from social on the ground at the conclave, and it just kind of it built on itself, and we were able to hit 1 million on that story, really. But and a couple of other viral videos. But I think ultimately what it is consistency and transparency and relevance, and being able to add context and sourcing. People really like to know where we get our information. I think that's super important, especially on the short form video platforms. It's people are like, especially on TikTok, I feel like they're stumbling on the news. They're not really scrolling for the news.
Mm-hmm.
So to make sure that we are that we're grabbing them where they are and making them stay and watch our videos and telling them why they're important and why they should be paying attention.
Yeah, interesting. And I think that's the showing your work thing, I think, is a really important part of this, and it just it's not being handed down from on high as it maybe once was in the 60s era of broadcast news of like, this is the truth, you must believe it, or whatever it might be.
People question us so much more these days. It's really I'm like, but we're Reuters, don't you just believe us? It doesn't always work like that.
No, indeed. And what about for the Hill, so actually, is it have there been journalists put on camera by the Hill, or is it more broadcast style reporting? You're one for a TV appearance yourself. Does that translate to social media in the same way, or?
It does. For us, I think our news creators are our journalists, right? We love having a sister television news network that we can go and talk about our reporting on, that helps amplifies our story to a broadcast audience. But with social media, it's also a great way for our social media audiences. We have 4 million followers on Twitter. We are short of 200,000 followers on TikTok, but we did have a late start. So it is growing slowly. We'll get them to explain or break down a news story, and that really resonates with people. They're on TikTok for challenges, for viral videos, for travel videos. Maybe that's what I go to TikTok for. But in order for them to kind of engage and stay and maybe give us a follow on that platform, they need to kind of appreciate and engage with what we do and want to follow us. They should maybe want to understand how Congress works or what's happening in the White House. And so that's what we'll kind of give them through our social media accounts. But it's also, we use our social media accounts now more to amplify our journalism and what we're doing, and engage with our audiences and grow our audiences, because gone are the days where we'd make all of this money from Twitter amplify programs or Facebook ads, and Facebook isn't driving traffic to news websites anymore. They are increasing maybe some amounts of traffic in the last few months to news platforms, but it's not at its peak 2016 levels, right? So we are very cautious about just making sure that when we do post a video with our journalists, we do post a video or a post on social media, it's really the best version for that platform, but also because we're such a small team, we're maximizing what needs to go. We wouldn't post the same thing on Twitter as we would Instagram. We wouldn't post the same thing on Facebook as we would TikTok. So we have to take a call on what format this story is going to take on different social media platforms.
Yeah, and to that point, have you seen any particular success? Do some formats work better than others? Do some platforms translate better than others to certain types of news stories, or is it really platform dependent?
I think it's a mix. I think, it's like you never really know. It's an art, but also a science, right? You never really know what's going to go viral or what's going to take off or what people are going to resonate with. Because, let's face it, for Kate and me, our news organizations are competing with thousands of other news organizations, essentially pushing the same news story at the same time to probably the same audience, because we do political news, and so we have to get creative about, and seconds matter. So did our post go up quicker than our competitors? Did we have a better caption? Did we engage our audiences effectively through posting a breakdown of this breaking news story on TikTok or Instagram, before everyone else? And that's really what determines success right now, because it is such a saturated media organization, like media environment right now.
Okay. So short video won't save you, but it might help. Is that fair, Kate?
I think that's fair. We have 3 platforms where we currently, well, actually 4, because we're doing a lot of vertical video on LinkedIn. I was going to say we have 4 platforms where we're actively every single day posting vertical video, but we won't post the same video necessarily on every single platform. Because where something would be more fun for TikTok, we might not put it on Reels because our audience there seems to really appreciate hard news and only hard news. And so, when we have something that's not quite as engaging in that vein, we'll post it on TikTok and Shorts probably, but we're selective with what we post to different platforms, because over the years and it's evolved a lot, but over the years we've kind of gotten to know our audiences wherever they are.
Okay, I have another couple of questions for the both of you, but just a reminder to our audience, please do engage in the comments and send us any questions that you have for Kate and Sarakshi. I'm sure they're happy to answer. 2 questions, one observational and one kind of a piece of advice. First question, are you approaching, and this is to both of you, are you approaching social media as more of a brand building than a traffic driving exercise now in 2025? Is that what you're seeing, the utility of social? Obviously, there's no huge fire hose of traffic anymore that there was in 2017, 2018. But at the same time, TikTok is introducing links to make it easier for people to go directly to your website. So maybe starting with you, Sarakshi, is it a brand building exercise more than anything else at this point?
100%. I mean, look at just how much news publishers have been impacted by the launch of Google's new AI overviews, right? We've all seen it across the board. It's something similar to what happened with social traffic a couple of years ago. And what we're seeing, and I think all news organizations that are focusing now on, is that direct traffic from their loyal audiences. And it's the loyal audiences who are most likely to follow a news organization on their different social media channels. So, they might be super users of our platform. They might go to 10 plus stories a day, or they might do 4 plus stories. But how do you keep engaging that loyal direct audience to get them to keep coming back for more? And that's where social media comes in. But I think all of us are grappling with this new reality of this, changing landscape of how we get traffic and how we get our news out there into the world.
Yeah, and Kate, I would add a layer of that, a layer onto the question for you. do you get pushback on that? If you say, social media doesn't drive traffic now, but we still need to invest in it because it's really important for brand building. Does that resonate internally, or do you have to make that case?
I think it helps when I make the case, but luckily we have really amazing support from senior leadership here, and everybody really understands the importance of social media and getting our journalism out there to the world on all of these different platforms. Because without these platforms, we are relying on people coming to Reuters.com, which they do. But also, we just introduced a subscription model, and we are looking to, increase our subscribers. And if you're not subscribing, please subscribe. and so we want to make it a really attractive product that we're asking you to come and visit, and I think all the social platforms really kind of feed into that overall mission. And I think everyone in the newsroom pretty much buys in, and we get a lot of support. And everybody, if anything, I get feedback that that we want to see more stories, or this story, or can we resurface some explainers, or that sort of thing. And we do we do flood the zone as much as possible. We're a very small team, as I'm sure Sarakshi knows, the struggle. but we do our best to put our best face forward on every platform, and we're really proud to do it because our journalism is the best on the planet.
Great. Final question then, just a bit of advice for maybe younger journalists who are trying to break into this field. There's kind of an inherent tension now of having to have a personal voice or brand on social media platforms. But especially, when you're up and coming, you haven't necessarily built that trust. How do you navigate that tension? What advice would you give to folks that are both trying to develop a beat and become a specialist reporter and have their own personal voice on on these platforms? Kate, I might start with you on that one.
Sure. This is such an important piece of it. We actually just sent out company-wide new social media guidelines for our journalists. What I'd recommend is, we want our journalists to be themselves and to have a presence on social media if they prefer. Some of the younger journalists I'm finding are just kind of absent from social media, and with the exception of maybe sharing their work if then. But I think you can include your voice as long as you're not including your bias. If you are a journalist, and being, building credibility and building trust is important to you. I say, share your work, be visible, and just make sure that you're not amplifying anything that's like retweeting or reposting anything that's questionable or not verified. You want to be as trusted as your media brand, and also you are representing your media brand. Mm-hmm. So you have to keep that in mind. Even if you have in your bio, my posts don't reflect my organization, it doesn't matter. Like
they do.
Retweets a lot.
Exactly.
About 2015.
Of course they do. So and I think most people know that, but I still see it in some bios, and it doesn't work. So whatever you say, you are representing your organization. And even if you have a private account, I say be really, really careful.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything Kate said. At least when I was starting out in journalism eons ago, my professors in journalism school would always say, approach with cautious if you are sharing an opinion, because if you are going to be reporting on a story and you are going to be delving deep into, whatever it is your beat is that really the best place to share it? Share your opinion over a dinner table conversation with your friends, but does everything need to go on social media? Probably not, right? And so, and I would say for young journalists to be open to audience, when I was first starting out, everyone looked at, it was an audience, it was social media journalism, right? And everyone looked at it as a clickbait, cheap form to get traffic. But if you understand actually what makes the audience tick, what makes them come back to your story, is it, can your headline be more captivating? Does it effectively grab the eyeballs of the algorithm gods, that's able to get your story onto Google or onto whatever discovery platform we're going to have in the next few years? That only works in your favor. It doesn't mean you're less of a journalist or you're less of an expert in your reporting, but it means that you understand how to effectively capture your audience as well as do reporting. And that just makes, I think, your reporting better when you know what makes your audience tick and what they want from your brand and your news organization.
Interesting. Okay, that's all the questions I have. We do have some audience questions. So first one, any platforms that you've seen have a significant change in engagement demographics? And the examples given is Facebook getting younger? Is TikTok getting older? I think probably the latter, certainly, but I couldn't answer the former. Would either of you have any insight into that?
TikTok is for in our experience, and again, it could be different for other publishers, but TikTok is definitely a younger audience, and Facebook is definitely an older audience in our experience. So in terms of a shift in demographics per platform, I think Facebook is just getting older, honestly. But maybe Sarakshi has another experience.
No, that's exactly right. And let's not forget, there's a whole generation of people who've left Facebook. So, it is now my aunts and my uncle's generation that only post on Facebook. My friends, I never see their Facebook updates. They have a Facebook account, but they don't post on it. They don't go on the platform. So there's that. And TikTok is anywhere from 19 to 25-year-olds who mostly engage with our content, I would say.
Interesting. And I guess when you're another question from the audience, how do you engage with social media in a way that's not detrimental to the job that you're trying to do? So how do you avoid getting sucked down rabbit holes and spending hours and hours trying to figure out what works? What steps do you take to kind of optimize that, both from a news gathering perspective and a strategy perspective? And so actually, if you want to take that first.
It's very easy to go down a rabbit hole on social media, as we know, as we're all aware of just staying up late and just swiping on reels or TikTok videos.
It could never have happened.
And there's a lot of theories out there and a lot floating around. I would say, if you're gathering news on social media, and you keep seeing posts of a similar vein, maybe question if it's a bot. Maybe question if it's is it a media strategy? I mean, we've seen it in foreign elections where the same opinion is kind of floated through thousands of different accounts to push just one messaging, and so you have to have that bit of skepticism when you're gathering news on social media and consider, is it AI, is it a bot, and I would say proceed with caution.
Yeah, and Kate, from a strategy perspective, how do you avoid just kind of chasing the latest trend as a news organization? I think it's very easy to see things trending on TikTok and be like, oh, we should try and do that. How do you kind of tread that high wire, I guess, in between being like, we should be engaging, but also stick to our brand voice?
Well, we are really lucky that we have the Reuters Trust Principles, and it's something we take very, very seriously. And so we see everything through that lens. And so if something is not serving us through that lens, then we skip it. But we do have a lot of, that said, we do have a lot of room to experiment. We definitely, is it very within the Reuters, visual ecosystem that we do green screens on TikTok? it wasn't, but we've been doing it for a while now, and I think it's really effective. And so I think it's just a matter of proceeding with caution and being true to our mission and to the Reuters Trust principles, and seeing what works and kind of letting go of things that don't work.
Great. And one more question from the audience, actually. So if social is primarily brand building, then building to what end? How do you know your brand is being built if no traffic or no money? So I guess the thrust of the question is what KPIs are you looking for when we talk about brand building and winning on social? Kate, I'd start with you there.
I think it's a lot of it. We have seen a huge drop in traffic, but it's as we said earlier, it has been picking back up a little bit. So we kind of we do still measure by traffic, just to make sure that what we're doing is effective in some way. Also, I'm constantly in touch with some editorial partners on the different platforms, and we discuss a lot what's effective and what's not effective. They give us tips, and they are familiar with our struggle, and sometimes they're super helpful. And for example, on Facebook, I know that that photo posts are more often surface than link posts. Like, just random nuggets like that will be really helpful in forming strategy. So so I think the KPIs evolve as the platforms evolve. It's like trying to pin a wave on sand. It's very much a losing battle if you're measuring against the same goalposts all the time. You know what I mean? I don't know if that was clear. I'm sorry.
No, perfect. And so actually, is that the same for you, kind of constantly evaluating, shifting, or do you have a North Star that you're
Yeah, I think, it is still traffic. We still, even though it's reducing, we are seeing some, gains. It's not massive, but it is still a huge source of how people find our news and engage with our platforms, right? But also it helps our journalists to push our reporting on social media platforms. We're informing our audiences through it, but it might also help, with all of the different arms of the business that we have, right? So having a huge following on a particular platform could, our ads team could take it and say, hey, look at our reach, look at our growth, and that helps them as well, in terms of pushing the fact that we do have a huge following, and people are engaging with us. So and you can't really have the same metrics of success for Blue Sky as you would TikTok or as you would Reddit. They're wildly different platforms, and you have to go off of figuring out, okay, what is most important on Blue Sky? Well, it's such a new platform. It's first determining if it's worth the effort, right? If people are really there. With Instagram, it's not growing followers, because that's kind of died down on the platform. No news organization is really kind of getting those, because Meta has kind of changed the way it works, right? In terms of getting people to follow. But it could be, oh, maybe if I post 10 reels a week, 5 of them could get over 500,000 views. That's a metric we would use. That means that people are engaging with the journalism we're producing on reels. On Facebook, it's different. We're seeing traffic start to tick up, so it's just measuring that week to week and saying, oh, why did one week do better than the other? Or so it's really you really have to be very evolutionary in the way you think about social media, because what we're also using as KPIs in June of today might not necessarily be our KPIs in December at the end of this year.
Yeah. So it's always an iterative process as you're trying to pin it down. That's all we have time for, and we've got no more audience questions. So last thing I'd ask is, is there anything other than the organizations across all the platforms, obviously, anything you want people to read, places you want them to follow you specifically? Sarakshi first, and then I'll ask Kate the same.
Yeah, I would say thehill.com. We're on every single social media platform you can think of. Please give us a follow. Please engage with our content. If you want unbiased political news coverage, quick, fast, easily discernible, we're your news organization and news outlet. So do engage with our stuff.
Great. And Kate?
I'll just repeat that.
Exactly the same. Reuters.com.
On all the social media platforms, and Reuters.com is looking really good these days. Come give us a visit and subscribe, and it's probably the cheapest subscription you'll get. So definitely come check us out. And thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you both for coming on. It was really interesting. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.